just tried to record this tutorial like 6 times and I keep getting caught on my own mouth. And it sounds so weird to read from a script. I might rewrite it to be how I type so it comes out more casual. But when I type informatively, that is how I type. My mouth is so wet. I also cannot nail down how to start the video at all. In one attempt I said, "Howdy howdy simmers." Oh my god, that sounded so bad. I'm going to leave it in though. And then I stopped recording and started over. Just as a warning, I'm trying to make this sound as good as I can. I have a snowball microphone and everything, but the cat's in the room and he never shuts up, and I have no idea why, but the audio is coming out kind of crummy. So I apologize if any of this sounds weird outside of the normal weirdness, like reading a script and feeling really stupid doing it, or anything like that. But, yeah. So, with that out of the way, this video is going to go over the basics of modding using Lot 51's Tdesc Browser and Builder tools. The Tdesc tools let you search for any of the Sims 4's tuning files, open them up, and poke around in them. We already have other tools that can do this, like XML Finder and Sims 4 Studio, but the difference here is that the Tdesc tools don't just open the tuning, but display them with searchable, collapsible, expandable, modifiable nodes that even feature full descriptions and explanations that come straight from the developers of the game. A lot of early modders use Mod Constructor to make things, and that's fine, but Mod Constructor doesn't develop a proper understanding of how what you're doing actually works, so most bigger modders don't tend to use it. Learning the Tdesc tools will help you understand better how mods work and will make it easier to get help when you need it, such as in the Creator Musings server over on Discord, where you can get help making any kind of CC and mods from people who understand how to use the tools that you're about to learn. Trust me when I say that you can in fact learn to mod from scratch just by using these tools and browsing existing content. Every file links to any other file it references, and you can work your way backwards to learn how things work and mimic how the game does things. I have prior experience modding The Sims 2 and 3, but had no experience with Sims 4 when I started using it, and the bulk of my knowledge comes from these tools. This tutorial assumes you have a baseline knowledge of Sims 4 modding, including what buffs, loots, statistics, traits, and strings are, and it won't go in depth on how any of those things work. At the very least, it's a good idea to know what those things are, which you can glean a bit of knowledge on just by playing the game. On the Creator Musings server, I have a theory I like to joke about, which is the idea that every single thing in The Sims 4 is either a buff, a trait, or a statistic, because once you understand these things, there's a lot you can do. I've made entire overhauls modifying basically nothing but these 3 things. As a small disclaimer, some very important options don't currently work on Mozilla Firefox, so you'll want to use a different web browser. To start, this is the main page you'll see when you open the Tdesc browser. The buttons in the middle here are your main tools. Open EA Tuning will open a search menu to find any existing game tuning. Open Local Tuning will let you find any local tuning you've downloaded or any mod packages you've made, which then opens up this workspace button in the top left where you can find everything that's found inside of your mod. And Search EA Strings will let you search EA Strings. Over here on the left you can find all the classes the game has to offer, which are all the different types of tuning. You can search up here and even add things to the favorites list to reference them later. When you want to make a new piece of tuning from scratch, this is where you go. Let's start by clicking Open Local Tuning to see the tutorial package you found below this video. This will add it to the workspace in the top left corner. And here you can see the package contents. Right now it only contains one file, the tuning for sitting by the swimming pool. Click on it to open the tuning and finally get a first look at the Tdesc Builder. At the top you'll see the file name and tuning ID. You can click on these to edit them. If you're making something new, you always have to edit these. Most tutorials will explain how to edit them in Sims 4 Studio and hashing a new instance from the file name, but the Tdesc Builder handles that step for you just by changing the name. If you open up an existing bit of tuning, you can change this information to make a new one of your own that uses the old one as a base without overwriting it. Below this is a series of buttons. They're pretty self-explanatory, but you'll mostly use Copy XML, Download Tuning, and Download Sim Data. Under that you'll find your tuning file. This is the same information you'd see if you opened this tuning in Sims 4 Studio. But on the left is where things get really fancy. From here you can inspect everything the file has to offer and modify it to your liking. Hovering over the names on any of these nodes will tell you what it's for and give a short description of how it works. You can click on the arrow on the side to expand or contract them. The 3 dots on the right can be used to access a submenu where you can jump to the tuning in the editor on the right side of the screen. You can also click on any of the tuning in the right side of the editor and it will focus it on the left side of the screen. Scroll through these nodes until you find the one labeled Basic Extras, or find it in the tuning on the right and click on it. To get a better idea of what we're looking at, let's find out what this entry here that says Buff does. Click the arrow to expand it until you find the part that says buff type. Here's the actual tuning that this part of the XML is referencing. If we hover over this little speech bubble, it will say that this is buff object chair is sitting. This chain will let us choose a different buff to put into this box here. You can find any of the buffs in the game, and the Tdesc tool knows that you're looking for a buff, so it won't show you anything that doesn't actually belong here. This is a good example of how we can learn by just viewing things in the Tdesc Builder. What does this buff actually do? If you click the three dots, you can choose Open in New Tab, which will then open up whatever this buff is, and we can click it over here in the top corner to see what is in it. There's not a lot in this buff, but that's just because this is a buff that the game looks for to check if the sim is actually sitting. But anything you need to understand, you can just open up like this and see what it says. Over in the main file, if you click on any of these nodes, it'll give you a little box in the corner with some information. It'll tell you exactly what this line says all by itself, and down here you can see the comments, which you can edit to give yourself notes for later. For now, we're not going to edit any of this, but you can click the X in the top right corner to get rid of this. Instead, click on this drop down to close what we just opened, and at the very bottom of the basic extra section you'll see this plus. Click on it and you'll get another node added with another drop down. Inside this drop down is anything that can go inside of the basic extra section of your tuning. For now, we're going to add another buff, so click on buff. This will add more drop downs that you then have to open up again until you get to buff type. Under buff type, we can click select reference to find an existing buff in the game. Let's say for some reason that we want our sims to be sad whenever they sit by the pool. We know that this is the section that decides what happens to a sim when they use the pool sit interaction, so we can add a buff here that will be applied to the sim that will make them sad. Click on the chain icon to open the search menu. When you search, you can use operators, which means using terms like and, or not. You have to type these in uppercase. An existing buff that makes him sad is the tragic clown buff, so let's try searching for sad and tragic. There it is. Click on it to add it to your tuning. You can see that it even checked the box for us. If you don't check these boxes, your tuning will not be active. If we click on the three dots, we can focus in the editor again and see that it has added this new section to the tuning. Normally you'd have to write all this out by hand, but the Tdesc Builder does it for you. So let's add some more stuff. Here's the buff reason, which will show up on a buff when it appears on your sim. Right now it's disabled, but if we click enabled, a drop-down box automatically opens with a new reference search that will show us only strings. Because only strings can go in this box, that's all that shows up. Click on any of these at random, it doesn't matter which one, it's only to make sure that your mod actually changed in the game. Most of the work you do in the Tdesc Builder will use the same format. You find the node you want, you expand it, and you modify it. So let's add a test. So we'll expand the test node until we find this drop down. Click on it, and again you get this search bar. Type trait in the top and select trait. Expand further until you get to blacklist traits. Select a reference, and again you can search, and again it's only traits because that's the only thing that can go in this box. Search for goofball, click it, it will automatically add it, and once again it will automatically tick the appropriate boxes. Some things on your screen might look a little different than mine. For example, some of these things were already expanded. That's because I've recorded this 6 or 7 times, struggling to make it sound right and tripping over myself, and I had opened them and closed them and ticked things and unticked things, but just go with whatever your screen shows you. It should look the same now. You can see this little asterisk next to some of the tuning, and what that means is that it's recommended you include this value in your tuning. Sometimes things aren't ticked at all, but they still matter. Like for example here, the subject of this test is an actor, but it's not ticked. So how does the game know that that's what you want? You can usually assume that whatever is set in the Tdesc Builder by default is what the game will think when it reads your tuning. Whether or not this box is ticked, the game still knows that the subject is the actor because it's the default. If you were to change it, it gets ticked automatically because it's important that the game knows that it's not default anymore. But we're not going to change it, we're going to leave it at actor, and it doesn't matter if it's clicked or not. Move your mouse in between the two sides here and you can find this little draggy guy. Drag it to the side and you can get a better look at either side of the screen. Here in our tuning, we can see everything we just added is all in this section here. Normally, you would have had to write all this out by hand, but the Tdesc Builder does it for you, and there's nothing to worry about. So now we have a buff that will get added to our sim with this reason and this type as long as the sim passes this test. Now that we've added the buff to the interaction, go up top to where it says Download Tuning. Click on Download Tuning and save it wherever you want. If you already had this tuning opened in Sims 4 Studio, you could click the Copy XML button, which would copy all this information, and you could paste it directly into the tuning you already have in your package. If your tuning needs sim data, this button will be highlighted, and it's very important that you click it to download the sim data. Whenever a package needs sim data, it needs sim data or it will not work. If this button is ever highlighted, you have to download it. To actually turn this tuning into a mod, open up Infor Studio, click on Tools. Did I just call it Infor Studio? Open up Sims 4 Studio, click on Tools, click Create Empty Package, name it whatever the heck you want, and you'll get an empty screen here. When you click Batch Import, you can select the tuning you downloaded, and it will show up here and show you the same XML on the right side of the screen as you had on the Tdesc Builder. This is where the Copy XML button comes in handy. Anything you've edited on the Tdesc Builder, you can just immediately paste back into here. Save your package to your mods folder. Before we actually go in game and test it, you can do a little bit of testing using the Sims 4 Toolkit package viewer. The URL up at the top of the screen can also be found at the bottom of the tutorial page on Patreon. On this page, any package you upload will show you exactly what's inside of it. The same as the Tdesc Builder, the XML will be shown on the right side of the screen. Any tuning in the package will show up on the left side and will give you any warnings if there's any issues found. The package viewer doesn't know what your package is supposed to be doing, so it can't tell you if you're actually missing something, like you forgot to put a buff in here, or you made a new loot and you didn't actually include the loot, but your tuning references it. Because it doesn't have encyclopedic knowledge of everything in the game and everything in your mods folder, it doesn't know if any of these numbers are referring to something that's not in the package. It can only tell you if any of this information doesn't actually make sense for the game to read in the first place. So now I'm in game with the sim who has the goofball trait, which means that this buff will not apply when she's sitting next to the pool. But here's the thing. Gunther doesn't have the goofball trait, and the buff isn't applying even though he's sitting next to the pool. That's because at one point in this tutorial, I ticked a box that didn't need to be ticked. Remember when I said I wasn't sure which of these boxes was and wasn't ticked by default? Well, I ticked the number of whitelists required, which means that the sim needs a whitelisted trait to pass the test. We opened this package up in the Sims 4 package viewer and it didn't tell us anything because it doesn't understand that we didn't actually have a whitelist. The tuning is readable, but it didn't actually make any sense, and it broke itself. So you cannot rely on the package viewer to tell you everything wrong with the package, and sometimes you're going to come across problems like this, even if you know what you're doing, even if you have a Patreon that currently has early access mods on it that people are paying for, and even if in the middle of this tutorial you found a mod that you screwed up and you had to post an update for it while you were making this tutorial, because you opened it up in the package viewer to show an example of how a mod works when it doesn't have any problems, and it had problems, and you cut that part out of the video. Anyway, if you followed along exactly, and you ticked this box, you need to go and untick it. Actually, quick correction, I don't think this was actually the problem. I think what happened is the second time I tested the mod, I did it by itself without anything else installed, and there must have been a conflict. The first time, I'm not sure that having a whitelist required would actually matter if no whitelists were assigned. But either way, the point was made. You can't use Sims 4 Package Viewer to find errors like this for you. It will only tell you about formatting errors. So if you were like me and made the same mistakes, once you fix that one little mistake, the mod works. You'll notice that the reason that I chose was in a language other than English, and the game is smart enough to read the English language string instead. So it doesn't say exactly what it did in the mod, but it figured it out for me, which is really convenient. So now we've just made a fully functioning, completely stupid mod, and didn't have to do any manual XML editing to do it. We didn't even have to open up a separate tool to get any information. So now we can open up any Sims 4 files we want and go absolutely nuts. A lot of the mods I make are quite honestly just existing EA tuning with new things added, using those same plus buttons and drop downs we just used in this tutorial. I've made several entire overhauls of traits, buffs, and even entire gameplay systems just by tweaking files like this. Thanks to the Tdesc Builder's ability to show you exactly what can and can't go where, you don't have to have encyclopedic knowledge of the game and what it can do or how it does it. You can just pop in, examine how something works, and learn by doing. Educated guesses go a long, long way. And everything you do in the Tdesc Builder will be some variation of what we just learned, just with different types of tuning and different numbers. There's hundreds of different combinations of things you can edit, but they'll all be edited the same basic way, and now you've got the knowledge to play around with it. Most tutorials aren't written for the Tdesc Builder, but now that you have the information on how to use it, and the more you understand what you're doing in it, the easier it will be to figure out how to translate those tutorials to the Tdesc Builder and follow along with them. I recommend finding random little things you think would be easy to change and just playing around to change them. Pick a buff and change what kind of mood it puts your sim into. Change how long it lasts. Find a loot and change what rewards it gives you or add new ones. Find something you don't like and give it a different result. You can do all that stuff with the information I just showed you. If you have any questions, you can check out the Creator Musings Discord and let me know if this tutorial helped you out, even though it was really long, overly wordy, and I feel like it came out absolutely terrible. I tried to be as clear as I could without being too wordy, which is really hard for me, which is really obvious because I'm totally rambling right now, so I hope it's not too much. If you have any questions for me specifically, or you need clarification of anything in the video, you can comment on the video, or you can find me in Creator Musings. Okay, it's over. Whatever. Bye.